Let's stay a little focused on Europe because the European Union has just canceled a joint project and funding for a Palestinian non-governmental organization after it refused to sign an anti-terrorism clause in a funding agreement for that $2 million project. Now, under the agreement, recipients of grants must make sure that members of EU-listed terrorist groups do not benefit from any of the funded programs. Well, the Badil Resource Center for Palestinian Residency and Refugee Rights refused to sign off on that, and they sent a letter saying that signing the contract criminalizes the Palestinian struggle against oppression and requires the recipient organization to perform screening procedures, which amounts to policing its own people. Well, joining us now in studio is Olga Deutsch. She's vice president of NGO Monitor. That's an Israeli group which conducts and publishes research about NGOs dealing with the Arab-Israeli conflict. Olga, thanks for joining. First of all, tell us about this particular NGO in this case, Badil. What can you tell us about them?
Well, they're a Palestinian NGO with quite radical activities. They go by human rights group, but we have them on record for years running poster context annually, in which anti-Semitic posters win prizes, and they usually go criticizing Israel, demonizing it, promoting BDS and similar things. In this particular case, they went one step further. I mean, let's just translate what this actually means. This means that they will not agree to not having to do with terrorists. They will not sign a contract, a 2 million euros contract with the EU, because they want to have the option of including terrorists in their activities, having them benefit from their workshops, or having them in the midst of their...
I want to clarify that these are terrorists not by Israel's definition, but by European Union standards.
Indeed, you're right. In 2019, the EU introduces a requirement, a new clause in the contracts with non-governmental organizations around the world. By the way, it is nothing to do with the Palestinian NGOs per se. That simply says, and this should go without the saying, but it says no EU money will go to NGOs that have ties to EU designated terror groups, will forward that money to individuals in contact, or will even glorify or sympathize with terrorists. Now, that should be a pre-given for any organization that goes as a human rights or humanitarian group. But instead, the Palestinian NGOs opened in December last year in a campaign protesting against this new requirement by the European Union. And the result of that, the first result that we are seeing, is actually Badil refusing to sign, following which the EU simply says, well, if you're not going to sign the contract, then we have to annul the whole deal.
Right. Are there cases of other Palestinian NGOs that you're aware of that agreed to sign this new clause for funding?
Well, right now the whole thing is actually under investigation. Earlier, beginning of May, we exposed a letter that was sent by the head of the EU mission to West Bank and Gaza to the Palestinian NGOs on this subject, basically saying, do not worry, because there is not a single Palestinian individual by name and family name on the EU terror list. No matter who you work with and no matter who you're affiliated with, this will not affect the funding. This caused, obviously, a great deal of diplomatic chaos. The Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the EU ambassador to Israel in Tel Aviv for a démarche, complaining about this. Following this, the High Commissioner responsible for this issue in the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee orders the EU mission in Tel Aviv and in Ramallah to investigate other NGOs with which they have been working. So we're now waiting to see what happens. We're waiting to see whether the EU will make an actual move, because in this case, it was the Palestinian NGO who refused to sign.
Right.
What we can tell you, based on our research, is that only in the last 10 years, what we could find at least 25 million euros went from the EU to 9 Palestinian NGOs with proven ties to PFLP, an EU-designated Palestinian terror organization. 5 people who worked for some of these organizations were recently arrested over Rina Schnerb's murder, for being directly involved. So this is a very, very serious matter, and we are all waiting curiously to see what precise steps the EU will take on this.
Right, and I want to clarify, even though you say the EU has not designated any individuals or Palestinian individuals as terrorists, they do have certain organizations. You mentioned the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Hamas being another one. So
Islamic Jihad.
Islamic Jihad. So if there's any individual who is an admitted member of those groups and are working together with one of these NGOs, that would be in violation.
Well, that's where the loophole. That's where the loophole is, because basically the EU, they call it the EU list of restrictive measures, because that's based on that list, the EU should and the member states should impose restrictive measures on these organizations and individuals. But if you don't have names affiliated to these groups, then it leaves it in a gray area.
You have to prove the connection there.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we'll see how this develops.